Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode here at amazic.com, where we talk to leaders and influencers from the cloud native and the Kubernetes space. So, we do these talks every month. We try to do it almost every week. We've already done quite a few with various vendors in the space. And the best part about these talks is that you really get to know what's happening in the space. You get to know the pulse of the space because you're hearing from people who are actually building stuff, building products, solutions. People are actually talking to customer organizations grappling with these challenges around Kubernetes and cloud native. So you really, get the pulse of the ecosystem in these talks. So, I'm Twain Taylor, editor at amazic.com. And want to encourage you all to head over to Amazic, that is AMAZIC, and keep track of all the stuff that we do, really interesting stuff. We follow events like KubeCon and HashiConf and a whole bunch of other events in the ecosystem. And we put out articles. We've even got job listings on the website. So definitely head over to amazic.com. So for today, we've got a special guest with us, and I'd like to welcome Tom Ellery, who is the Senior Vice President of Worldwide Field Operations at StormForge. Tom, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Was that a mouthful to say?
Yeah, it was all right. I managed it. I got it written down.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you in the Amazic's ecosystem.
Yeah, and we just actually had a conversation with Patrick from StormForge as well. So for our viewers, who are watching this, I'd say if you find this interesting, once you watch this, definitely look for the other talk with Pat Bergstrom from StormForge. So Patrick is the CTO. So he gave us the technical details behind StormForge's solution and just the ecosystem in general. And today, Tom will be talking to us about the challenges that organizations face, as they work together, different teams, and as organizations are trying to solve this challenge, Tom is walking with them through this process, and so he's got a lot of on the field, insight to share with us, and that's what I'm hoping to glean today. So, Tom, if you could get us started with, just your career path so far and just the road up to where you are right now, StormForge. Just give us a little bit about your background. That'll be great.
Certainly. And before I do that, let me just plug Patrick, who is our CTO, worked at Optum Healthcare here in the US, which is the largest healthcare provider, is an SRE in understanding the production. And he also worked at Best Buys. So it's important always to get, if you're out in the field trying to understand what customers are challenged and struggling with, get a customer's perspective. And Patrick joined us recently from a customer. So it would be great as a follow-on to get his business perspective on those things. Absolutely. For me, myself, I've been in the IT industry for over 30 years. Wow. I've done 6 pre-IPO companies across the different stack items, storage, networking, and SaaS-based software. So I've spent predominantly all my career in large enterprise customers, trying to deploy early stage, innovative new technologies. And StormForge fits right into that sweet spot.
Wow, awesome. I'd like to just get to know a little bit more about you from what you just said. 6 IPOs, that is a lot. I mean,
not IPOs, pre-IPO companies. Okay. I wish there was 6 IPOs on that, but that's not always the case.
And is there any one of them that's really noteworthy that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, well, one of the companies that I was the first 25th employee, we took it from like 10 million in revenue to 150 million in revenue and went to an IPO. It had a very unique offering. It was storage for virtual workloads. And if you understand the virtual workloads in VMware and you start seeing the trend as it relates to Kubernetes, there's a lot of parallels and analogies on creating kind of the next gen abstraction for the DevOps process. So I have a lot of experience selling this type of technology into these large enterprises.
Mm-hmm. Wow, really cool. So, you come with a lot of experience and you've seen all of the changes. And, so what's happening today, in some ways, it's new, but then for you, you probably connect the dots and you see how it's the same old problems, probably dressed in a different way. And, I'd like to get some of your thoughts on those lines. I'd like to start with just asking you, what are some of the challenges that you see with, large enterprises that you speak to today, as they deploy Kubernetes and cloud native systems, specifically around scaling these systems and when scaling them, optimizing them so that they are efficient, cost effective, and they don't compromise on performance. So what are some of the challenges that you see as you speak to enterprises?
So one thing for sure, it's very consistent, the challenges in these largest enterprises. And one area that we'll talk probably greater at is really at scale. So people that have been deploying hundreds or thousands of containers within Kubernetes. And the three challenges that we see consistently are: one, how are the application developers knowing how to pick the right resources, compute and memory specifically, to run their applications?
Yeah.
And that, especially as I said earlier, at scale. So today it's predominantly guesswork. So a lot of people are doing what I would call t-shirt sizing. Okay, my application needs X amount of resources in order to sustain the performance requirement, meet all the latency so that my end user customers aren't going to feel the impact. And they do this t-shirt sizing. Is it a small, medium, large, when you go out to AWS, Azure, or other cloud providers, on the resources you would like to have? And most of them are really kind of putting their finger in the air and trying to guess at that. And so part of our magic is taking the guesswork out of it. But today, a lot of them are still guessing at it. And what comes out of the guess is what's commonly known as over provisioning. And if you look at, to your earlier point, there's a lot of the problems that people have seen in the past be repeated today. If you look at virtualization, people over provisioned all the time because they didn't know what resources were required for the application. Same exact problem that's going on in Kubernetes, only at a greater scale, because there's so many more complexities with Kubernetes than there was with VMware. Second big challenge that we see is this idea of moving everything to the cloud, whether you've developed your own application as cloud native, whether you've migrated or you refactored, trying to get a handle on the costs, because it's out of control for a lot of the large enterprises, where this concept of we should be able to save operational cost as we go to the cloud. What people are realizing, there's a lot more complexities with moving to the cloud, and it's adding additional costs that they thought they would remove. Maybe they don't own the infrastructure, but there's a lot of dev and operational costs associated with that. So a lot of companies are now realizing, ooh, I'm spending more in the cloud than I ever did in my private data center. How can I rationalize those costs and optimize the environments? And so that's another really big, and in fact, they're spinning up now what's called FinOps organizations to take a greater look at that. So that's certainly a big challenge. And the last challenge is this whole Kubernetes and cloud native deployment is very complex, and it requires a certain level of technical expertise in the industry. And the industry lacks a large number of really deep, in-depth technical resources to solve the problem at these large enterprises. So you have maybe one or two developers or one or two kind of platform engineers that understand the complexities, but at scale, that falls down pretty quickly. So having the ability to have software solutions help automate that process and remove some of those complexities, especially for the mundane task, like tuning applications, is a huge issue that large enterprises are challenged with.
Wow, I think you really you really framed this whole discussion well in your 3 points. And I'd like to dig in a bit more into each of them. If we could talk a bit about, what we're talking about, the first point, over provisioning and t-shirt sizing. Could you just give us a few more details on, some examples of what are some, because there's obviously some factors that developers use to make a guess. It's probably an educated guess based on some factor. Do they look at the applications they've previously built? What are some of the factors they use to
Yeah, so
estimate?
that's a great question. And unfortunately, there's not a single answer. And the reason I would tell you that is each application is a little bit different. For instance, if you're migrating a Java application from kind of historical legacy architectures onto a cloud
Mm-hmm.
platform, you need to understand as much about the application. So with Java, you have garbage collection, you got heap sizes, you have a host of parameters inside the application that you need to make sure are tuned once you put it into a Kubernetes environment. Then within Kubernetes, you have certain amount of parameters that you need to understand: CPU, memory, replicas, all those things. Combine those two together, and it's almost an impossible equation to solve mathematically. And that's why the guesswork happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so having an algorithmic way to do that, like machine learning that we do at StormForge, it helps provide that solution. Then you look at developing an application from the ground up, cloud native, and you have never have experienced a, let's call it a Black Friday or a Cyber Monday, and you have no real concept of what the volume of information from customers is coming into your application. So you do some performance testing, but even the best performance testing tools will not mimic what a real world deployment looks like. And so you roll your application out, and I'm sure you've seen this across the industry. All of a sudden on Cyber Monday, the application is cratering and customers can't actually acquire the tools or the products that they want. And the application wasn't ready for scale. So that's a completely different problem that we can help solve with performance testing tools and actually doing what I would consider optimization by design. So designing the optimization ahead of deploying the application in production. So there's not like one simple way to do this for the different application requirements, but building a process around, especially the DevOps process, with optimization more as a key component, and optimizing for design is critically important as people scale out their cloud native environments.
All right, all right. And to give us a number to understand this more, how much would you say do organizations over provision by? What's the kind of spare capacity usually that you see?
Well, that's it. I would answer it this way for you. The solutions that we're providing, I'll give you a customer example. Acquia, who's a large SaaS platform for Drupal, optimized a specific application that they were running. And when we optimized it, we saved them 65% cost on the resources they were using against that application. That should give you some sense of the quantity of over provisioning that's going on. In other more broad estates, we're seeing on average 30 to 40% savings with resources, compute, memory, and others for optimization. So I guess the general rule of thumb is most people are probably over provisioning 80, 90, 100%. And then when they over provision, they rarely go back and take the resources back.
Okay, that is massive. Okay, 80, 90%, that is huge. I was probably expecting around 40% over provisioning, but then 80 to 90% is serious. And I think there's big cost savings to be had here if organizations can just fix this. Fascinating, those numbers. And your second point about the costs, the spiraling costs. So there's different kinds of organizations at different points in their cloud journey, and there's some of them that are just getting started with containers and Kubernetes, some midway. So at what point do you see that organizations actually start to realize that this is expensive, just as expensive as traditional cloud? Is it in the early stages itself? Probably not. But at what are some of the alarm bells that organizations should pay attention to know if they're actually overspending on Kubernetes and cloud native?
Yeah, that's, again, I think it varies by different customers, but I would agree with your statement that typically day one operations or day zero operations, people don't see these challenges. They're just trying to figure out how to get the applications up and running in their cloud native environments. What we've seen in the customers and large enterprises we deal with, we're talking about hundreds or thousands of containers or pods deployed in production when they start seeing the level of complexity and then cost scales overrun. I'll give you a really good example. We have a large financial customer that deployed to the cloud early on. I'm not going to tell you what cloud platform they went to, but it was one of the three largest ones in the industry. They started seeing fairly significant amount of runaway costs. What they decided to do is migrate their workloads from that cloud provider to another public cloud provider. But what they did differently this time is they started using our tool in a process where they would right size the applications as they moved it from one cloud vendor to the new cloud vendor. They would right size the applications using StormForge tool, optimized live, to make sure that when they put it onto the new cloud vendor, they had the right resources for the application. So this concept of just, throw the applications out and we'll just build the largest environment possible to support them. They actually were very thoughtful in their architecture and right-sized the design with StormForge optimization tools. So when it landed on that next platform, they didn't have an overspend in mind or over provisioning in mind. So they built a process by leveraging our tool to do the migration in a very efficient manner.
All right. And, to go back again to your first response, I'd like to flesh out one more idea, which was FinOps. I think an important phrase that you used there, because a lot of the challenges that organizations face, related to optimizing Kubernetes and cost specifically, they have these challenges, but they've not really defined them very well. And I think FinOps as an idea is a great way to really, give shape and sort of define those challenges. Could you tell us a bit more about what FinOps means for those who are familiar with maybe DevOps and other terms, but then they've never heard much about FinOps? Could you explain it a bit more for us?
Yeah, this is a new emerging, let's just say, approach in the large enterprises. And it's really three kind of stages that people look at. Inform, meaning you really need to understand what's happening in your environment. So you need to have the visibility and understanding how the resources are being consumed by the applications. And there's a lot of different tools out there for pulling in those assets, right? And understanding how you can get a visibility within your own organization. And that's an ongoing development that you'll see. I mean, a lot of the observability tools that are out there today, the telemetry information that's collected, help to give you that inform and visibility, right? And so that's the kind of the key cornerstone to FinOps. If you don't understand it and can't see it, you can't measure it, you can't correct it. Where we come in a big way is on the optimized side. So you have inform for FinOps, and then you have optimization. And there's very few tools that actually will take a look at the information and then be able to take action and fix and remediate the problems. It's great to have all this data and the metrics for this data, but what do you do with it when you have it? And what we're able to do, especially with Optimized Live, is take action against those metrics and fix it within a production environment in a very short amount of time in a very informed way using machine learning. And then the last part of kind of FinOps is operate. Can you make this operationalized? Can you automate it in such a way that it's in a continuous loop? You inform, you optimize, and then you operate. Those are kind of the three pillars with FinOps that become important. And StormForge is a key tenet on the last two, specifically the optimize and operate, because we build in our solution to CI/CD tool chains and integrate them into solutions like Datadog so that we can integrate into their dashboarding. It allows you to operate within large environments by leveraging the different tools.
I love how
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I love how you frame your response to this, in just these key terms that, that really stick, that you mentioned: inform, optimize and operate. I think those are just great ways of putting it across. And I wanted to get in a little bit more into the ML and AI part that you were mentioning. But before that, I want to ask you a bit about the third part of your first response, which is you're talking about the talent gap. Just it's hard to find great Kubernetes talent, and so but a lot of organizations probably are throwing talent at the problem. Trying to get optimize their workforce as much as they can. Get platform engineers and developers to be able to be more efficient, more aware of their use of resources. Could you talk a bit about these efforts and why they may not be the best way to optimize your Kubernetes?
That's it. By the way, very thoughtful and very good question. I would encourage you, and I'll send this over to you and each of your partners to take a look at. The whole concept of DevOps is to allow you to marry the development side of things with the operational side of things in a seamless, collaborative way. And a lot of people have made great strides on that. And there's obviously the whole business rationale about the ability to release more code on a higher frequency base. This is kind of the whole promise of cloud native and Kubernetes, is to get more quality code out on a more consistent basis so you can make the appropriate changes and meet the business requirements. That's the whole inertia behind the DevOps process. I think what the industry is realizing, there's unique skill sets, both in the development, performance engineering side of things, which is more application centric, and then the platform engineering things where they care about, like the SREs, like, okay, there's a problem. Where's that problem? How quickly can I remediate it? Can I ensure that the problem doesn't occur again? And there's a really great article by the New Stack. And it talks a little bit about how can you embrace platform engineering, which is a more holistic solution, and making sure that there's not this divide between the development application teams and the platform teams. And it's a very different mindset, a very different skill set. And the companies that have done it really well, which we've seen at very large enterprises, almost cross-pollinate, where they'll take and platform engineers and have them work in the dev environment, or developers and work in the cloud environment or the platform environment. But there's only so many people that have that skill set. And that's what creates this gap for talent in the industry. And we see this more and more and more. And if you think about what we just talked about, the largest enterprises have thousands of applications running on a cloud platform. Trying to manage those and throw bodies at it is an impractical solution. The software tools that you need to leverage are how you're going to solve that problem. You'll never be able to get enough people with that knowledge base to solve the problem. It's impractical.
Yeah. And so, obviously the alternative and the solution to this is not more people, but better tools, better software that actually solves specific problems. And that'll be a good way for us to segue to talk about StormForge. But before that, if you could just tell us machine learning, artificial intelligence, how does this play into this whole, optimization, Kubernetes optimization? What does it do? How does it work?
Yeah. So, I'm going to say this, it may not come off the right way, but in today's marketplace, the challenge of machine learning and AI, it's a buzzword that every application software company uses today, because it's the next generation trend in software development. Oh, we have ML in our software, or we have AI, artificial intelligence in our software. So we as a company get very uneasy in talking only about that, because quite candidly, people in the broader industry are very uncomfortable to understand, what does that really mean? Everyone in their software industry is saying that. And I think this is a really key point for StormForge, and why I think we're so different than so many other companies that put that moniker on their software. We as a company started out, our core competency was around machine learning. And we developed machine learning algorithms to help solve business problems. So the thought process was
Okay.
develop a machine learning platform that can help solve business problems. We started the company with 3 people, 2 of which were applied mathematicians with Harvard PhDs. We have 5 PhDs in our company around applied mathematics. And there's a big difference about talking about machine learning and having the discipline of actually really understanding the intricacies of applied mathematics and how your machine learning can solve a business problem. And so we set out with that mission in mind, and we actually incubated these algorithms for 2 or 3 years before we started looking at business problems to solve. And one of the first business problems that we looked to solve was, believe it or not, it was more around data center space and how you can look at power, cooling, electrical devices and optimize those for kind of carbon emission and having a green footprint. And during that journey, we started looking at our own software, which ran on Docker Swarm, and we were porting that over to Kubernetes. And that port, we realized there's so many different complexities and variables that we can apply our machine learning algorithms to solve it. And so now we're using that as our platform, our machine learning platform, to solve this optimization problem with software and not just the kind of the data center problem that I articulated initially. I hope that gives you a little bit of frame of reference why I don't like to talk about just ML and AI. That word is overused in today's software industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get into a few more examples in just a few minutes. But, like you're saying rightly, ML and AI is overused, and sometimes there's fatigue around hearing these terms. But, I've been around in the space for a while, and I see that, there are a lot of companies, a lot of, startups and vendors trying to solve problems around managed Kubernetes, around Kubernetes monitoring, around security. But I think there's very, very few that I've come across that actually talk about optimizing Kubernetes performance, cutting costs. So I think, StormForge is quite in a niche in this sense, in a space where, there's not too much already happening, and where StormForge is really innovating in a place where, there's a big need. And so, I think in that sense, I think it's really cool what StormForge is doing, very unique in the space.
It is quite a unique product. And what we would tell customers is you shouldn't have to do the trade-off between cost and performance. And that's where the trade-offs become, right? This is why people over provision. That's the cost equation of it, because they don't want to actually have performance issues, so they throw resources at it. And what we would say with our optimization platform is you shouldn't have to make those trade-offs, right? And we'll give you the ability as a platform to hone in and optimize the performance characteristics for your applications with the right amount of resources to meet that. And we do that because we've got years of experience and tons of examples with large enterprise customers, how you can either use what we'll call an experimental process for optimization, which is our Optimize Pro, and or an observability optimization technique, which is called Optimize Live. So having a spectrum or an end-to-end solution to look at both, experimental and doing multiple trials and iterations with an application. It could be a Black Friday, it could be Cyber Monday, it could be some other event that you want to measure, Super Bowl Sunday. And then taking that and looking at how your application runs within a production environment through observability. We're the only solution in the industry that has that end-to-end view in a way to actually help solve these very complex problems through an optimization platform.
Yeah, and someone listening, right? They probably have already been thinking about, ways that they can, ways that they can optimize their own systems. And so they're probably thinking of the solution right now. And so StormForge, is a great solution. But if you could sort of guide, the listener into how they should approach, solving this problem. Where do they look in their systems? Where do they start? And then what do they do to assess something like a StormForge and its fit for their system and solving this problem? You could sort of guide the listeners into just thinking through, the solution of these challenges that we just discussed.
Yeah, I think there would be three ways if I was scaling out my Kubernetes environment to think about when's the right time to optimize, right?
Okay.
And I would say this is both on the dev teams. Is you have a performance engineering team that's continually trying to figure out what are the peak performances for the application, and they'll run tests. Typically, they run 5 tests, 10 tests over a course of a year as their applications get kind of deployed.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we saw at one of the use cases at a very large SaaS-based company is they were deploying applications. They would run 15 tests in about 6 months. With Optimize Pro, we ran 450 test scenarios, experiments on that application against some of their performance characteristics in a week. So you want to talk about scaling, you want to talking about getting quality code out and making sure that that code, when released, can meet your requirements. What a great way to do something. You have, 450 trials or experiments versus 15, and that's done in 30 days versus 6 months. So that's an example of an area with performance engineering as well as the development arm where they can actually get more comfortable with knowing that when they release the code, it will meet their performance, latency, whatever the characteristics around that application. So that's one example of an area to kind of focus on. The second one is, and we talked a little bit about this, about the observability platforms. There is no enterprise company that does not have observability platforms deployed. The problem with observability platforms, it's awesome and it's great. It collects so much telemetry information. Is what do you do with that telemetry information, right? How do you know you can remediate the problems that you're seeing in a very timely manner? A lot of people are writing scripts. A lot of people are being proactive. But what if you had a tool that could look at all this telemetry information in real time and then make the adjustments without you ever intervening on it, right? With letting the machine learning tell you what's going on and how to set the CPU request limits and other aspects about CPU and memory, and balance potentially your HPA and VPA within a Kubernetes environment. And that's a process that is also an art and not easy to do, but allowing sophisticated software platforms like StormForge with Optimized Live, you can now do that within a software application in production. And it's those type of areas that I think the end user enterprise customers are challenged with. And then the third one we talked about, right? It's usually your finance guy. Even CIOs today are really focused on the financial aspects of it. They're going to want to hit their budgets. They're going to want to meet the requirements, and having the ability to have tools help you with that and give you visibility through a Grafana dashboard to show you how much dollars you are saving because you've optimized those resources is a significant step in these large enterprises.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a bit more about the last part of your response, which is there's different stakeholders in this whole process. There's the ops team or the platform team, and they're the ones who primarily manage the Kubernetes systems. But their customers, internal customers, are developers, and then, like you said, there's the CFO, the CIO. So there's different stakeholders involved, different people this whole decision affects. And so, someone listening to this and who's thinking about how do I present this to these different stakeholders? What are some ways that you found that help? You've given us already one example, talking about a Grafana dashboard. If you could talk a bit more on those lines, just, how does someone take this to their fellow stakeholders? And what are some ways that they can reduce the friction to, adopt something like this, which is pretty new?
It absolutely is. It's It's ahead of the curve in some ways from
Yeah.
where people are deploying. But I would say two things to answer your question. One, all the large enterprises have a cloud platform team or a hardware platform team, right? Where they're supporting, like you said, the different business interests and applications.
Yeah.
They're the ones that understand the challenge that developers have with trying to size the environments with the right resources. If you started with the cloud platform team or the hardware platform teams or IT platform teams supporting Kubernetes and introduced Optimized Live, that would be the ideal way for them. And believe it or not, they can deploy that and make the adjustments without ever having the dev teams to be concerned about it, because the machine learning is adjusting as the platform's running against all the different applications. So that's one area that I think would be the ideal place to start, is the platform teams, cloud and Kubernetes platform teams. And there's always a host of people there. The other area we talked about, mostly on the software side of things and the development side, performance testing, performance engineering, are tools that people have used for decades and decades. That's a great way to actually introduce Optimize Pro, where you can actually optimize application parameters as well as the hardware performance characteristic parameters, and make sure that when you're deploying your applications, that the environment that you set up will work at scale. So I would say definitely the platform teams on the cloud side, and then certainly the DevOps teams and the performance engineering side. The platform kind of spans both those areas. And the other one that we've seen a lot of traction is the SREs. The SREs, at the end of the day, are the firefighters, right? When there's a problem and trying to isolate what that problem is.
Yeah.
They have a really good appreciation for where there may be resources that are starved or over provisioned and our applications that have performance problems. So we've seen a lot of success. The SREs, usually I look at it from this, they're the ninjas or the experts that know both sides of the equation, the hardware side, the platform side, as well as the dev side. And they're the ones that could use a tool and help implement it so they don't run into some of those late Friday nights or Saturday calls and try to avoid those.
Yeah, yeah. And, last question, that I have for you on from our main questions list is, in terms of just pricing for StormForge, the StormForge obviously helps save, more than probably half of what you're spending in the cloud right now. But how much does it cost for the StormForge service itself, the solution? Could you, and for our viewers listening, they're probably curious to know, what percentage of that?
That's a great question. So our pricing model for the platform, there's two components. I talked about Optimize Pro and Optimize Live have a similar pricing model. We price against cores that are being optimized. So if you look at your applications, how many cores are the applications using? And this is for both Pro and Live, and we price against that. And we have a certain dollar amount per month per application. Starts off at $6 per month per application, depending on how many cores. And then it goes down from there. And then typically at the scale we're working at, we have a lot of customers that are looking at enterprise license agreements that we work with them, customizing their pricing models with them. And interesting you ask about pricing. So the company, as I kind of alluded to earlier on, was founded on the entire premise of greening the data center, right? Remember I talked a little bit about that? The company's vision was to help reduce overall carbon footprint in supporting the greening of the data center. So our quest is to change the inevitable outcome of how much resources were being consumed. Our CEO and the company are very much built on this mantra. And we have a cloud waste guarantee as a part of our business model. And that cloud waste guarantee is from our CEO. And he pledges that if we can't save you 30% cost reduction within your Kubernetes resource, that we will pay your cloud bill I think it's
Wow.
up to a certain dollar amount for a certain period of time. But that's how confident we are in our solution, is that we're willing to put kind of our money where our mouth is from a cloud waste guarantee.
Wow, that's quite a bold guarantee. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
very much so.
All right. So, thanks so much, Tom, for just sharing generously from your insights from the space and just giving us a real context around optimizing Kubernetes. I think it was really interesting. I could keep going in this discussion, but I've got a few more questions to get to know you a bit more, some fun questions.
Can I interrupt? One last thing, because I know we get this all the time. Like, how can we try or test the software? What I would tell them, partners as well, is just reach out to us. We can get you an in-depth demo so you understand it, and then we'll download Optimize Live into your environment, let you test it.
All right, cool. So, I guess it's a trial download for a month or so, is it?
Yeah, usually we'd like to speak to them, make sure the environment's set up. There's always security things you want to make sure are set up, but you want to engage with one of our people, a global, and we are global. We're throughout Europe, we're throughout the US, we're in Asia. So just, I think those type of contacts are important out of the gate to make sure that things go smoothly.
And what's the setup like? Is it simple, just install an agent and you're good to go? It monitors, tracks everything automatically, or is there a bit of setup?
Yeah, we basically provide a controller that sits within their environments in a cluster, and then you deploy from there.
Okay, all right, neat, great. So a couple of questions for you, Tom, just get to know you a bit more. So the first one, your alternate career path, if not for your job in tech.
Two things. One, I wanted to be an FBI agent when I was in college.
Right.
So that was a career choice that I looked at. Today, I would love to be a teacher and helping supporting kids, whether it's in math or other areas. But I think my initial one was be an FBI agent. So you guys should watch out, right?
Which class do you ever think of if you'd ever, help kids with math and stuff? Which grades are you thinking of?
Yeah, I think from a patient standpoint, I think I would probably be best served kind of in the 6th to 10th grade area.
All right. Patient standpoint. Neat. So one work tool that you can't live without?
Email. Email to me is the standard communication. Now every company uses Slack, or they're using all these other texting, and it's very difficult to keep track of all of them. I'm a traditionalist and I still use email all the time.
Yeah, so to tease it out a bit more, so if you think back, you probably used a bunch of devices and clients for email. Which one is the most nostalgic for you? Probably the one you use the most. Like
Outlook.
way back.
Outlook.
Cool.
Outlook. It's the tried and true. I mean, even Gmail, people obviously we use Gmail, but Outlook to me is the one that I grew up with and I find the most comfortable working with.
Yeah, that was the gold standard for a long time. For many still.
No doubt about it.
If you could have lunch with one person, living or dead, who would it be?
Wow, by the way, that's a great question. I'd have to say Queen Elizabeth II that just passed away, to me, would be the one person I would love to have lunch with. If you look at her commitment and passion, talk about high integrity. When she was 21 years old, she made a commitment to serve her purpose, right, in the monarch. And she lived through that right up to the day that she passed away. You think about it, she had a meeting with the prime minister. And so that would be one person I think has so much history, and it would be just incredible to sit down with her at lunch and have, because I think her temperament and the way she handled a lot of challenges over those 7 decades is pretty remarkable. I mean, and it's sad to see she's gone, but that would be one person I would love to have sit down with.
Yeah, she's seen pretty much everything over the past century. Have you been following her for a long time, or it's just more recent
No, I followed, the monarch here in the U.S. People get enthralled with the monarch, and then you see all the ebbs and flows. I mean, I think if you look back with Princess Diane, that was a big thing,
Yeah.
and so it's just been one of those things that I've always kind of followed and watched. I've come to England all the time on business. I love London. It's probably one of my most favorite spots in the world. So it's all, yeah, always pass by Buckingham Palace and stuff. So, it's been out there for a while. I should have just gone and introduced myself to her, I guess, huh?
The last thing you Googled.
I believe the last thing, I could pull up my browser, but I think the last thing I Googled was some architecture on Kubernetes.
Okay. All right.
Because all the scaling
surprises
stuff that we
there.
talk about, auto scaling, horizontal pod scaling, vertical pod scaling, people get confused on what that means and how it works. And we're trying to help synthesize that down, especially with the release of Optimized Live, which allows you to do that in a much more automated, simplistic fashion.
All right, cool. Yeah. The last one for you, your favorite tech blog or writer or website.
Wow, my favorite tech blog. Okay, this is totally self-serving, but the ones that I read the most are the ones from the people that work in our organization. So there's a lot of really good content from StormForge on the market space. And it's not specifically around our product, but kind of the trends in the market space that are taking place, and why certain solutions can help solve certain problems, and the history. We talked about this at the first, you made a really poignant observation that I think the IT industry repeats its ills over and over again. If you look at virtualization, creating some of these abstraction layers, and then how people manage that at scale, they try to solve that with VMware and vRealize, and there's a bunch of tools out there that really never solve that problem efficiently. And now we have Kubernetes, yet another abstraction with even more levels of complexities because of the flexibility that you can have with microservices. That I think the industry is repeating itself, and a tool like ours can help solve those problems in a much more automated and intelligent manner. And that's why I think a lot of the content that I read is around those type of things.
All right. Awesome. So with that, we come to the close of this interview. Lastly, Tom, where do our viewers find you online?
So people can reach me at tom@stormforge.io, and also obviously on LinkedIn too, right?
Okay. So is your name Tom Ellery, or is it spelled?
No, it's just Tom, Tom @stormforge.io.
I mean, like on LinkedIn, are you like Thomas or Tom?
Thomas Ellery on LinkedIn.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Probably one of the few Tom Ellerys on LinkedIn.
Oh, yeah. All right. So with that, we come to the end of another fascinating discussion. Thank you, viewers, for watching. And I want to remind you, if you found today's discussion interesting with Tom, I want to encourage you as a follow-up to go and listen to Pat as well, Patrick Bergstrom, who's the CTO of StormForge. Listen to the other one. It'll be a good compliment. I think Tom really helped frame the whole narrative around these challenges that we face. And Pat really got into the nuts and bolts and the details. So, it's a great complementary interviews that we've got. And just check out all of the other stuff that we have as well over at amazic.com. That's amazic.com. So with that, I'd like to sign off. And thanks again, Tom, for joining us.
Thank you very much. And I look forward to meeting everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.